bless you guys. Thank you for tuning in to Let's Talk About It. And today, not necessarily a formal topic, but more so bit of testimony, bit of story time. The story is about my husband's and I's beginning, or where our love story kind of started. And if you are very close to me, you've been in a part of our lives, his or mine or both, for years, you probably know a lot to this story, but I know a lot of people don't, and it really is something. And I know I've had other episodes I've recorded that say a little bit about it, but I've never told the whole thing because you definitely need like a whole episode just dedicated to our love story. So bear with me because I'm also having like terrible allergies, borderline sick, so I will definitely probably be coughing, so forgive me if I do need a pause and just take a quick water break. But I want to take us back to where it kind of all started, and then I'll give you backstory to that. So obviously I'm telling the story from my perspective, so my husband's recount will be maybe slightly different in terms of how he saw things, how he felt about things. So obviously I will be sharing it from my point of view, but our story goes back 15 years about, and everybody knows I recently turned 28, so yes, you could do the calculations. Kind of started when I was 13 years old. My husband is about 4.5 years older than me, so he was like 17-ish when we started dating, although that was short-lived, but a lot happened in that short amount of time that we're dating. So I will backtrack a little bit to where it really kind of started, and all of this really is just our story. I feel like it's so impactful, and I can't wait one day to share it with my kids. I definitely think that I will hold back on all the finer details till their later years in life, but it sure is something. Like, if you hear it, there is no way that you do not see what God did when you hear like the story and how it transpired. So my parents, his parents, were going to a church. Obviously his parents had him. Years later, my parents had me. My parents, his parents have always been like, you know, in the same church, kind of friends, you know, mutual friends and stuff with a group of other church folks. And eventually things started kind of going left in that church, and they kind of, I don't know if they got together and they was like, we out, or, you know, it just kind of happens. They were all kind of trying to hang on, but things started getting really messy, and they all started kind of dipping out, like the families, the different families. And my husband's family was one of those people that left. They started going to this church. Eventually, my dad was, I think, one of the last ones, because he's a very loyal person, so he really wanted to stick around. But things, again, were just getting very, very messy. And eventually, he was like, okay, my family and I are dipping out too. So obviously their family friends, you know, a group of people had left and had all kind of started going to the same church. So I'm sure, you know, my parents had asked his parents, like, hey, where are you guys going? Like, let me visit. I'll see if I like it. My dad loved it. And he stuck around. I probably came to that church when I was like 5, and that was the church that I was a part of up until I moved here to Texas. So that's been all I've known. Same for kind of my husband, although he had a period where he congregated elsewhere, different from me. But pretty much our stories have been like intertwined for a really long time, since birth, you can kind of say. I actually have this picture with my husband that I will find, and I'll probably make it the cover of this, but it's literally my husband and I sitting up on the altar, on the chairs, you know, old school, bunch of chairs in the altar, and we were both sitting on the altar. And I've asked my father-in-law about the backstory. He's like, I don't remember. I think somebody told you guys, like, go up there. And then you guys just like plopped yourselves there right next to each other. And I took the picture. And to this day, like, I now know what that picture really means. But we were like not even in the same age group. So it's not like we were friends or anything growing up. It was literally just, we would see each other at church, but everybody was kind of to their side with their own friend groups. And so we congregated in the same place, pretty much grew up around each other. We were very involved in church. Our parents were very involved in church. So obviously we were always around each other, but kind of nothing having to do with the other because everybody was in their own group of friends. My parents were very, very strict, in particular, my dad. So I was not allowed to like hang out with any guys. It didn't matter if it was in church. It didn't matter if he was there, he could see me. It was just a no. Like it could be other girls in the group. It was like, nope, you're not going to be a part of that. And that was his way of like protecting me and whatnot. And so I never really was anywhere near him. Nor was he, like we were kids. Like we were generally just kids. We were considered the kids. They became obviously teenagers way before we did, like him and his group of friends. Eventually, fast forward, his parents, right, were family friends. So my father was very fond of like my today father-in-law and mother-in-law's kids, so my husband, his sister and stuff, that were also a part of the church. And so I remember, I think it was 6th grade, I had graduated 5th grade in New York. 6th grade, there was an opportunity presented to my dad. My dad bought a house in Connecticut. It was about an hour and change from the city, and he decided to do it. It didn't necessarily pan out eventually how we wanted, but at the moment when we had to do the move from New York, we did it obviously over the summer when I graduated 5th grade, and I was going to start 6th grade. I was about 12 years old, and I remember during that move, my dad asked my husband today to help us with the move because he needed help obviously with the boxes and all those things. So he take him with us, you know, he was riding the car with us and stuff. And I remember this was a period in my life also where I was starting to like, you know, like develop, and I was trying to like dress nicer. Like I now cared about those things like appearance, kind of my hair look kind of thing. And I remember he gave me a compliment during that move, and I acted like it was no big deal, but I definitely like phoned my best friend at the time about it and was like so ecstatic and like gushy. And it was weird because I had probably received compliments before in some sort of way, you know, in school, but I feel like none of it hit home like his did. I don't know why. I don't feel like he even said anything extra. But again, I played it down, I downplayed it, like, oh, you know, thank you, whatever. And I remember I told my best friend about it, and she was like, girl, he says that to my sister, like he says that to all the girls. My husband was a player back in the days. He was dating all the church girls, not at the same time, I think, but he was definitely like hopping around the different boroughs, dating a bunch of different girls, a part of our council for our church. So he definitely had that fame to him. And so whatever, it stayed at the compliment, but I feel like it started something in me. And I was just like, okay. And then my best friend told me that, like, you know, this is just a thing. Like, that's just who he is. I tried not to pay mind to it, and I kind of forgot about it. Fast forward, eventually we need to move back to New York. I believed he might have helped us with that move as well. And once we were back to New York, obviously we're congregating in the same church again. At this point, I'm a lot more like, I look more grown. Like I'm officially like a teenager. I'm starting to take interest into like what I look like, and, you know, trying to at least be cute and stuff, and, you know, wear whatever is in and just whatever. My husband at the time, obviously not my husband, I guess started taking like a bit of an interest in me, like finally like noticing me. And so at the time it was AIM, right? And he keeps kind of sliding in my DMs or whatever messenger thing. And he's like trying it, like subtly, eventually gets my number, starts transitioning to texting. But it was like very subtle flirting. But I was like very like, oh my God, like this was like very new to me. It was a great feeling to have somebody kind of this interested in me. But again, I had what my best friend had told me in the back of my mind. I knew he was a player. So I was just like brushing it off and acting like I didn't really care about his interest in me. But the thing about my husband is that unfortunately my husband loved the chase. So the more I would push him away, the more persistent he was on, you know, like I'm gonna go after her, particularly because I kind of wanted no parts and was not impressed and wasn't drooling over him like everybody else was. Internally I was, but he did not know that. So anywho, he was very, very persistent, very persistent. That dude did not give up. And eventually, like, he did start having a place very near and dear to my heart. And it was like, it was, for me, it was not lust. For me, it was not surface level. I really did fall in love with him at the time. And I remember at the time, like, people could not understand. They're like, you're so young, you don't even know what love is. But I really felt like my feelings were genuine. I knew what I was feeling. It was so strong. And man, I fell head over heels. I was like, this is the man I want to marry. Like, I want to have kids with him. God, it was like insane. But I definitely felt harder for him than he felt for me. So we did start dating. But again, I was kind of a chase. It was like finally when he had me, you know, we tried dating and whatnot. But that had its hurdles because, again, my parents were very strict. So we couldn't have like a normal dating. Oh, yeah, go out on a date. It wasn't public knowledge to my parents. It wasn't public knowledge to his, to a certain extent. So it wasn't like your typical dating nowadays. It was like very much like, oh, let's sneak around and see when we can see each other. He would try to like pick me up from school, but my mom would pop up and then just start following us. Very awkward, guys. Like, I was very sheltered. Or at least my parents were really trying to shelter me from like dating and boys. And unfortunately, I feel like that did do the opposite. It's kind of like what they tell you can't have the most is like what you end up wanting the most. So that was kind of my upbringing. It was like all the things that they tried to keep me away from were the things I was drawing to. And at the time I was exploring, I had really bad friends as well, like really bad influences, unfortunately. Remember middle school for me was like everybody was so into sex. Like, everybody was having sex. You know, girls were showing up to school with hickeys. Like, it was like everybody was pretty much having sex. I was not having sex. I was like the oddball out. But everybody was like dating several people, like dating this guy, then breaking up, dating someone else, making out in the staircase. Like, it was just a whole thing at that time. So again, at a young age, I was also overly exposed to like things I shouldn't have been watching. They weren't rated R, but they just weren't age appropriate. So it got like my mind like sexualized in a way. So when I started to see that around me, again, I also had a really big identity crisis where I was kind of required to be different, right? Because I was Christian and I hated it and I didn't want to be different. So all of that mingled together, you know, not having the best influences around me, really wanting to kind of go against the current in terms of my upbringing in church. I did get like a really big interest in like guys, like all that stuff. And eventually like guys in middle school also started flirting with me. But eventually like I was very interested in my husband now at the time. And I explored that. I don't know, I definitely was a little delusional, right? Because I obviously knew the age gap. So in my mind, did I maybe think that this guy was going to wait for me? I think so. I really don't know. I don't remember. I don't really think I thought it out about like, how far is this going to go? How far can this really last? Like, I really maybe did think like, yeah, we could date for years. I don't know. I just fell so in love that I really was just like, this is the man that I want like in my life forever. But obviously I don't think that was the same. I think for him it was like he was used to dating temporarily and not necessarily dating people with the purpose of marrying them. And I was not the exception. He was dating me, he liked me, he thought I was cute, whatever it was hard to get. So he was very interested in that. Eventually we get together because of everything going on in me and around me. We obviously take flirting to another level, and I've shared that. I lost my virginity when I was 13 to my today husband, which all in all, I know I failed God. But I always say that if there's anyone that I could have chosen to give my virginity to or have sex with for the very first time, I'm glad it was him, because he was very just respectful. It was not forced, anything like that. Like, it was just not a bad scenario, right? And it wasn't someone that like I no longer speak to, someone that didn't even care about me. You know, it was none of that. And I'm grateful for that, because I know that that's not everyone's experience. So the fact that it was with someone special at the time, and then obviously it's with someone that's still special in my life, that is special for me. And so we decided to have sex. That blew up. So eventually his parents found out, my parents found out, our pastors found out. It obviously became a really, really big thing. The main thing was the age gap. My father had, I feel like his world had probably come crashing down at that point, because here's this little girl that he has worked so hard to kind of shelter me and shield me. He had no idea, like, all the sneaking around and all the stuff that I had going on either. He was always very hardworking, so it was like the time that he got to spend with me. My parents are also older, like a lot older. My parents had me in their late, like 30s, 40s. It's not like we would ever sit down and talk, you know, other than how was school. So we didn't have like a close relationship, trust, or anything to explain to them what was going on. So up until that point, my father thought I was this most innocent being. So when he finds all of this out, he obviously thinks the worst, that I was manipulated into making this decision, you know, because this person is older, which it really was not the case. But obviously that's what he believed. So he wanted to just throw him away, throw the book at him, all those kind of things, when it came to my husband. So the decision was made. My in-laws have, my brother-in-law lives in Rochester. She was like, okay, we're going to send you with your brother. You're going to live with him for some time. And that became some years. I believe his later high school years and early college years were spent over there, about 4 years or so. So obviously it had an impact on him, as it had an impact on me. I obviously thought that I was delusionally going to spend like years dating him, and we're going to have like such a happy ending. So I was obviously heartbroken. I felt like I had disappointed my dad severely too. Still was suffering with this identity crisis. So there was just so much going on. And that definitely affected me for many years of my life. But eventually we lost touch. It was his decision to, like, that's it. Like, let's not communicate. Let's not make things worse. I think distance will do as well. And then it was kind of, I never had his number. He had my number. So he would kind of reach out to me randomly, very, very randomly, very sporadically. He eventually, I think after a year, also started coming back during the summers to visit New York and his parents. So I would see him. So every time he would come, I feel like those feelings, like, they never fully dissipated. They were kind of there. I always said he would have a special place in my heart because of everything that transpired, and I think that holds true. So, you know, every summer he would, you know, kind of mess around with my head a little bit, but it never amounted to anything. Eventually he would always leave, go back to his life. He was also in a committed relationship, so to say, where he was living. And, you know, eventually it was serious. Like, he was going to propose and everything, because he thought this was who he was going to have his life with. I also kind of, you know, forgot about him in a sense and made my life. I dated while he was, you know, away, and I was here into high school and whatnot. And eventually I remember, you know, in that period, I really went back and forth a lot. And I have letters to this day written that say, I don't know if this is where our story ends, but I don't think it does. And I have another one that says, I don't know how God will bring us back together, but I know he will. And it's kind of crazy because I kind of prophesized my life without knowing that. Like, I had this huge faith being that young. I was like, this is the man I want. Like, I have a whole letter stating the characteristics of the man I want. And it was pretty much me entirely describing him on paper. And these were letters I would write to God. Like, that was my way of communicating with him when I was a teenager. And eventually, obviously, I forgot about the letters, but I think God definitely did not. And the desires of my heart at the time, although I forgot about them, eventually lined up with God's will, which I didn't know that. At the time, I really just, this is what I wanted, God. I don't know how you're going to make it happen, but I think you will. There was a hunch. Like, there was something in me where I felt like him and I were meant to be. Eventually, I kind of forget about all of that, though. I proceeded to kind of date. He made his life. We really didn't have much contact. Eventually, his story with his former girlfriend kind of starts to crumble. There was some deception on her side that he was just unaware of at the time. So eventually he finds out. His world comes crumbling down. He gets into a very depressive state. His parents are like, okay, we'll bring you back home. And so here is my husband, Junior, coming back. I remember at the time I tried to be a really good support system to him. He needed support, and I had a lot of like general love in my heart for him, and it had nothing to do with like feelings of being in love. It was just, I have love for you, like you'll always have a place in my heart. It was nothing romantic. It was just, I want to help you out, like I want to be a good Christian person. At that time I was trying to get right with the Lord, and that was a part of that, like forgiving everything that had transpired around us, the hurt that we probably caused each other at the time. And we had matured, we had evolved. And I was okay with the fact that God had put us apart. At least that's how I saw it. You know, I was like, we were, at that point, I was like, we weren't meant to be, and that's okay. Like, maybe we could be good friends. So I talked him through his entire breakup, and I really tried to be a good friend to him. You know, even when he started eventually getting ready to get out there, like I encouraged him. I would make fun of him with flirting with girls and stuff of that nature. And I was just living my own separate life, and my own friends. I just had my own world going on. And eventually, he kind of develops an interest in me again. And I'm kind of like, whoa, pause. I remember thinking of this elaborate long message that I put together, because I was like, we're not doing this again. Like this whole playing games thing that we've done before, like it's old. At that point, one, I was mature. Two, I was really trying to do right by God, and I was just not trying to do that anymore. And I remember sending this long paragraph, and I'm like, this ought to kind of like put him off and he'll leave me alone. So I never knew him to be a serious guy, at least not when it came to relationships. So I read this long thing pretty much saying like, we're not going to do this whole playing around thing, sneaking around. No, like you want to date me, you have a genuine interest, you're going to talk to our pastor, you're going to talk to my father, and you're going to do this right this time. And I thought that that would put him off, and it did not. What he actually did was exactly what that message told him, which was show me that he was serious about his intention and his feelings. And he literally sat with my pastor, he sat with my father. And I was shocked. I was like, I guess this is happening. And obviously because of everything that transpired last time we dated, I fell head over heels for him. That was not necessarily reciprocated. I remember praying to the Lord, and I was like, I want you to protect my heart. Like, you know that he's already been in there. That's never fully gone away. However, I want this time to be different. Like, I don't want to be the one to fall for him and then that's not reciprocated. Like, I need him to genuinely be in this if this is what we're going to do. And I remember it literally happened just like that. Like, my husband, this was a new person that I did not recognize. Like, the way that he fell for me, it was so new to me because I had never experienced that. It was literally like me watching the way I fell for him years back, now in reverse. Like, now it was him, like, genuinely, like, with this deep love and affection for me that he would show in just all types of ways. And I was just in awe because it was literally my prayer to the Lord, like, let those be his feelings towards me, like, revert the tables this time. And then I will feel safe to, like, love him without reservations and putting everything in the past. And so that's pretty much it. Like, the way the Lord brought us back, it's crazy because we did obviously things wrong and we were, separated. I always say the Lord, separated us, but he's the one that brought us back at the right time. That period of time that we were not together, we needed that. He needed to learn his lessons. He needed to mature, and he also needed to dig deep and settle his things with the Lord. I needed to do the same. Like, when we started dating, we obviously made so many mistakes and did things so wrong because there was so much immaturity. Our life with God weren't right. So eventually when we get brought back together, we've learned so much. We're in a different place with the Lord. We are ready to now give ourselves to each other in a different way than we did years ago. And we're trying to put God as like a priority, which we definitely did not do when we dated when we were younger. So, it's amazing when you hear this story, like, literally God had to kind of wreck his life for him to come back. He would have stayed. He was literally on the verge of marriage, guys, like ring and everything bought, like I've seen it, and literally proposal and everything. So that could have happened. Like, had that gone a different way, had God not broken that up in the way that he did, he'd be married and have kids with somebody else today, and I would have continued my life and maybe ended up marrying someone else. But the Lord is so purposeful, and sometimes we think we're so far from where he wants us, but he has a way of just making things work. Like, it's like puzzle pieces, and it's like if you kind of release and let him take the reins of your life, That is literally what he does. You're over here, but I need you guys here. So let me just move all these things around and make sure that you guys are here. And that's literally what God did with us. I feel like he brought us back at a perfect time. We were not perfect people, but it was a perfect time. We were better people. And I say we weren't perfect because we had a lot of issues that arose when we dated. We had a very tumultuous relationship, lots of breakups in the entire years that we dated, because there was definitely a lot of baggage. There was a lot of things I hadn't dealt with. There was a lot of scars from his, relationship, long-term relationship he had come out of, obviously hurt from it. And so that kind of seeded into like our current dating years. But nonetheless, right, I feel like it was always God, like that glue, that magnet, like that brought us back. Like I feel like it had nothing to do with us. It was never, I want you this bad, I want you this bad. It was God, like God's divine intervention. I always say that. Like, thank God for his divine intervention, that whenever you seek his will, which I've always kind of asked for that, like, God, your will before mine, he finds a way to, again, line us up where we are. When you're not pushing and pushing against where he wants you, and you're just, I'm letting you take the reins. God does beautiful things when we allow him to do what he needs to do. So I hope you guys enjoyed. For those who did not know the story of where our love story starts, my husband and I, and how we've been united with great purpose, which I know my husband and I actually have a calling over our lives that I don't share pretty much with anybody. Like, if you know it, it's because you were there maybe when that was said or has been said over our lives, but I don't share it because I think that what God will do will shock people. What God will do in and through us will shock people, especially people close to us. But that picture that we have together up on the altar, that seems to be the start of our story. And I know that God is definitely far, very far from finished with us. We're still imperfect beings, but the Lord has brought us together with great, great, great purpose. And I'm eternally thankful that that my will, like my desires, matched up with the Lord's will, right? That it wasn't something different. It was, he actually gave me exactly what I wanted, but he also surprised me because I did not expect that to be the case. So I am forever thankful for the Lord that he has given me beyond what I could have imagined. I wanted a life with this man. I wanted kids with him. And here we are, over 7 years into marriage, doing this thing called life together, especially with God at the center, and obviously our beautiful children that we've had in our years of marriage. So grateful to the Lord and grateful to share a bit of our story, because there's a lot more to it, but that is a little bit of our story with you guys and our beginnings and how the Lord broke us up just to bring us back together. So hopefully this story blessed your life in some way. Some part of it blesses you and speaks to you. You're never, never, never too far gone. Just let the Lord take the reins of your life, and he will literally put you where you need to be and with who you need to be and where you need to be. God bless you guys.